Hey everyone, welcome to the How to Shop Smart webinar. This is just a short video where I'll be sharing with you tools that you can use to save both time and money. My name is Rob Siabanis. I'm a dietary intern and graduate student working with the USC Center for Work and Family Life. So just a quick overview of what I'm going to be talking about. First, I put together an introductory activity just so everybody can get a bit warmed up. Afterwards, I'll share with you some interesting shopping facts. And then I'll be talking about some of the tricks that supermarkets use to tempt us into buying things that we usually don't need. And after understanding those tricks, I'll conclude by sharing some tools that you can use in order to shop smarter, which will save you both time and money. So this is the introductory activity. I'll just ask you a few questions. And you can think about them and see if any of these situations have occurred for you. The benefit of this being a video is that you can pause whenever you want just to think about it for a bit. So yeah, the first question is, have you ever purchased items that were not on your grocery list? Or have you forgotten to buy items that were on your list? Have you ever spent a lot of time in the supermarket looking for one item? Or have you ever felt lost in the supermarket? And the last one, have you ever thrown out produce that has gone bad? And actually, like, could be any item that has gone bad. So again, you can take a moment to think about these. But if you've answered yes for any of those questions, you're not alone. I answered yes for all of these questions. And for some of them, I said yes with exclamation marks. But the fact is that more than 80% of shoppers make impulse purchases. So that means like basically items that they didn't intend to buy. They just happened to see it and they bought it. And that's more than 80% of shoppers. And it's not that they buy one or two extra items. On average, 20% of the items somebody buys are an impulse. And this is the average. So it means that there's people who buy like 40% of their items are impulse, or some people buy fewer items on impulse, but 20% is quite a bit. And also, if you've ever felt lost in the supermarket or felt bad for spending too much time, again, you're not alone. Like the average shopper spends about 30 minutes, and that's just on the floor. So we're not counting the drive back, taking everything out of the bags. It's just on the floor, and that's 30 minutes. And considering that most shoppers but basically they go on 2 trips per week, that's quite a bit of time. And finally, nobody likes throwing away food, but it's actually very common. The average US household wastes approximately 1/3 of the food. So a way I kind of visualize this is like, imagine you're eating an apple and you throw away every 3rd bite. That's a lot of food, and it's food that we pay for. And so it's very easy to feel bad about, doing these things, buying things on impulse or throwing food away. But really, like, it's more complicated than that. It's not that it's all our fault. So that being said, the fact is that supermarkets use a lot of different tricks to tempt us into buying things that we don't really need. And when we buy things that we don't need, we have too much food and we end up throwing a lot of that food away. So what are some of those tricks that supermarkets use? So first, the supermarket itself is designed, a lot of thought has gone into the design, actually. So they're made to be overwhelming and confusing on purpose. So this is just a picture of an average supermarket, and it's not like an industrial or corporate store. And the only difference is that the picture is taken from above. So as you can see, it looks like a maze with a bunch of colors. So just imagine being in there, and it's overwhelming. So yeah, that being said, the average supermarket carries approximately 4,000 edible items. So we're not counting cleaning supplies, toothpaste, beauty products, none of that, just edible products. So if you're looking for one specific item, it's kind of like looking for a needle in a haystack. And that's done on purpose to be overwhelmed, to have so many things around you and to get lost. Another tactic supermarkets use is that they place the essential items on the perimeter. So the essential items are items like fresh meat, fresh produce, dairy, things like that. And basically the reason they do that is because when you're shopping, because the average shopper will buy all of these items, they're forced to go through the whole supermarket. So basically you have to walk all the perimeter, which means that you will see as many products as they can force you to. And that's important because when it comes to shopping, the more you see, the more you buy. So that's why the aisles in supermarkets are made to be very long. And even though they could have built gaps between the aisles, they don't do that. So you have to go through the whole aisle in order to get something you need. So that means that you see as many products as possible, which means that you're more likely to buy something on impulse. Maybe popcorn, maybe brownies, maybe a piece of candy, maybe ice cream. It's all done on purpose. So when we buy a lot of things on impulse, it's actually, we're just doing whatever the supermarket wants us to do. It's not that we are entirely to blame. Now, these are just some of the tricks. There's many tricks and techniques that supermarkets use. For example, most supermarkets will play very slow music. So slow music typically leads people to move slower as well. So that means you move slower, more time spent at the supermarket, you see more items, more impulse buys. I found that very surprising, but so there's tons of things that supermarkets use. So now that we know some of the tricks, what are some of the tools that we can use to shop smarter? So by far, the number one tool is a shopping list. So the fact is that shoppers that use a list and follow that list, which is key, they tend to be healthier and they tend to make fewer impulse purchases. And the fact is, though, that more than half of the shoppers, they use a shopping list already. So really the problem is that it's more about how you use the list instead of just using a list, because I can just write a list and I go to the supermarket and I stop using the list and I just start buying things on impulse. So how can you make a list more effective? So the first way you can do that is to follow the layout of the supermarket. So what that means is, like, imagine there's like a typical supermarket layout. So they place the items around the perimeter. I'm not sure if you guys can see that because of the video, but just imagine like there's, the pantry, then there's the coffee, maybe the vegetables a bit later. So what you can do is when you're writing the list, you can order these items by appearance. So if the first section you see is the produce section, first write all the vegetables, the fruit, then you can write the coffee items. And it's a pretty simple thing to do, but it's very powerful because it means that when you go shopping next time, you will only need to go for one trip around the floor. So you won't need to go back and forth. Maybe you forgot to buy a produce that's on the other side of the list. No, you don't need to do that. You just can go through one time. And also it saves you a lot of confusion of trying to find all the produce items on your list. Pretty simple, but very effective. Another way you can make the lists more effective is to basically use planned meals as a reference. So for example, if let's say it's Saturday and I'm planning to have minestrone next week. So what I can do is I can take the ingredients for that recipe and put them on the list. Very often shoppers will go and they'll buy various items pretty randomly, like cucumbers or tomatoes or apples here and there. And what ends up happening is because there's no plan for those items, there's no recipe, they end up not being sure how to use those items and they get thrown away. Again, it's more about like planning it, and you can end up actually saving quite a bit of money because you don't throw away various produce items and pantry items as well. So the final tip is to use a shopping list even when you're shopping online, because a lot of us are used to using a list when we're walking around the floor, maybe have a list on the phone, but it's also important to use a list when you're shopping online, because supermarkets use a lot of sneaky tactics to tempt you into buying more things. They can throw out advertisements, banners, surprise offers of the century. And what's amazing is that those offers are tailored to you. So for example, if you like buying a lot of vegetables, they will throw a lot of vegetable offers. And so you might end up buying things that were not on your list. So it's pretty important to use a list even when you're shopping online, so you can stay focused. Another tool other than the list is to use a simple timer. And what I love about the timer is that you only need to use it once. The next time you go shopping, you can try setting a timer for the amount of time you kind of approximate that your trip is going to take. So for example, if you think that shopping takes about 30 minutes, set a timer for 30 minutes and see how long it actually takes you to shop. You might be surprised, maybe not. I was definitely surprised. I thought it would take me 30 minutes and my trip ended up taking 45 minutes. And that was very useful because I thought, and I went back and I realized that I was spending a lot of time in the center aisles of the supermarket, which I'll talk about later. But having those numbers is actually very useful. And again, you only need to do it once. So the benefit of the list is that you also need to do it only once, because when you create a list, you can just use the same list and just keep printing it. Maybe you need to make a few edits, maybe remove a few items, but you can keep the categories. So for example, here I have a sample where it says like grains, herbs and spices, meat, and you can keep that template and just keep editing on that template. So it's not like you have to keep writing everything from the beginning. And what a lot of people do is they create a document and they print it out, they put it on the fridge, and then, whenever somebody notices that something's missing, they just write it in the category in the list. So then the next time you go shopping, it's already in order. So again, it's like you only need to do it once, and then you get to save a lot of time and trouble for all of your future trips to the supermarket. Again, simple, but pretty effective. Now, we covered tools. So now I'm going to talk about strategies. To use a football analogy, it's kind of like, the tools are the equipment, like the helmet and the shoulder pads, and the strategy is the game plan. And research shows that actually the game plan, the strategy somebody uses when shopping, could be even more powerful than the tools themselves. So first, it's very important to plan your trip ahead of time. So I know like it can be tempting sometimes, especially after work when somebody's tired, to go to the supermarket just because they want to buy a few snacks and maybe buy a few things that they actually need, but they don't have the list. And it might seem like a good idea, but what ends up happening is that because there's no plan, and because we're tired, we end up buying a lot of things that we don't really need. So just planning ahead is very useful because that allows time to just write out that list. Then another tip is to basically take advantage of various offers. This sounds pretty obvious, but actually there's a lot of ways that you can get some really good deals. Most supermarkets have apps with offers, digital coupons. There's also the weekly offers that most supermarkets mail to your house. But also there's like customer loyalty cards that most supermarkets have. So when you add all these things together, you can end up saving quite a bit of money. But supermarkets know that shoppers like a good offer. So what they'll do is they will actually provide like customized personal offers. This happens often. So for example, like again, if you like vegetables, they will give you a lot of vegetable offers. So you might end up buying items just because they're on offer, they're on sale. So it might seem that you're getting a really good deal, but what happens is that instead of spending $0 for that item because it wasn't on the list, you end up spending some money regardless if it's like a 2-for-1 or 50% off. So it's very important to first write the list and then see whether some of the items on the list are on sale. And maybe you can make a few substitutions, but I know I'm definitely guilty of buying many items just because they're on sale and I think I'm getting a good deal, but I end up buying too much. So another tip is to shop in the morning. This might be a bit difficult for people that work, a 9-to-5 job, but if it's possible, it's a great idea because the morning is when we're typically the sharpest, we're the most focused, and we're able to kind of weigh our decisions a bit better. So instead of just buying a soft drink on impulse, we might think about it and look at our lists. In the evening, after working especially, we tend to be foggy, we tend to be tired, and we tend to kind of go on autopilot, and it's not our fault. It's just our bodies doing their thing. They're just tired. So if it's possible, it's a great idea to shop in the morning. Now, if you end up shopping in the evening, as a lot of us do, it's not hopeless. You can actually try drinking a cup or 2 cups of water and have a small snack before the trip. And it's very powerful because it will blunt your hunger. You will not be as hungry and as foggy, and you might end up buying fewer snacks and fewer things that are just impulse in the moment, like ice cream, chips, or this guy has a lot of popcorn. He loves popcorn. So because it's actually a hungry shopper, research shows that they will buy many more snacks. They will sometimes buy double the items because the hunger takes over. So again, like having a bit of water and some snacks before you go shopping is very effective. And finally, and this is probably the most important strategy, is to shop the perimeter. Like I mentioned before, most supermarkets will put the essential items in the perimeter, like the produce, dairy, fresh meat, and the center aisles, these very long aisles in the center. That's where they will put like the packaged goods, cereals, candy, things like that. So just be mindful of that. Try to spend as much time as possible on the perimeter instead of the center, because I know, like, I didn't know this. So in the past, I would just stay in the center and, buy a lot of things that probably I don't need. And yeah, so what's very interesting about this is that you don't have to make any changes to your diet. You can just keep that in mind and try to spend more time on the perimeter. Just be mindful of when you go to the center. And what will happen is, like, you will probably end up shopping fewer processed foods, and which means that you're going to eat less. And it's an easy way to start losing some weight without making any major changes to your diet. So yeah, that's it. That's the end of the presentation. I really do hope you found out, like, you learned something interesting today. I know I did, researching this presentation, but if you have any questions or any feedback, you can definitely reach out to Julie Chodby, who's the Health and Wellbeing Program Manager. And that's it, basically. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Fight on.